Story 1. The Vanishing of Kathy Marie Moulton. September 24th, 1971. Portland, Maine. The fog rolled in from the Atlantic, thick and heavy, cloaking Portland's streets in a ghostly shroud. Streetlights flickered, their amber glow barely piercing the mist that curled like a living thing around the old brick buildings of Cumberland Avenue. Kathy Marie Moulton, 16, stepped out of her father's beat-up Ford, her auburn hair catching the last sliver of twilight. She was a junior at Deering High School, a girl with a laugh that could light up a room and dreams that stretched far beyond the gray horizon of her small coastal town. Tonight, she was buzzing with anticipation. A dance at the community center, a chance to lose herself in music and forget the weight of her everyday life. She clutched her brown leather Mexican purse, a gift from her cousin, its contents simple: a house key, 2 tubes of toothpaste, a crumpled dollar bill, and a folded note with the name of a song she wanted to hear at the dance. She waved to her father, George, promising to be home by dinner. "Don't worry, Dad," she called, her voice bright but tinged with the impatience of youth. He smiled, unaware that this moment would haunt him for the rest of his life. Kathy's sneakers scuffed the pavement as she headed toward Forest Avenue, the fog swallowing her silhouette. The air was damp, carrying the briny scent of the harbor and something else. Something acrid, like the faint whiff of decay. She pulled her jacket tighter, her eyes scanning the shadows. Portland was safe, or so everyone said, but tonight the streets felt different, as if the city itself was holding its breath. She stopped at a drugstore first, picking up pantyhose and toothpaste, her fingers lingering on the counter as the clerk, an older woman with tired eyes, rang her up. "Big plans tonight?" the woman asked, her voice raspy from years of cigarettes. Kathy nodded, her smile fleeting. "Just a dance," she said, tucking the items into her purse. The clerk watched her leave, later telling police she'd seemed distracted, like a girl who'd seen something she couldn't quite name. Her next stop was the music store on Forest Avenue, its neon sign buzzing like a trapped insect. The shop was a haven for kids like Kathy, its shelves crammed with vinyl records and posters of bands with wild hair and electric guitars. She found her friend Sarah behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Sarah was a year older, with a sharp wit and a penchant for trouble. "You coming tonight?" Kathy asked, leaning against the counter. Sarah grinned, nodding. "Wouldn't miss it. You wearing that blue dress?" Kathy laughed, her cheeks flushing. "Maybe. Gotta look good, right?" They talked for a while, the conversation light but laced with an undercurrent of unease. Sarah later swore she'd seen a shadow move behind Kathy, a flicker of something in the store's back corner where the light didn't reach. Probably just a customer, she told herself, but the memory gnawed at her. Kathy left the store around 6 p.m., promising to meet Sarah at the dance. "I'm walking home first," she said, adjusting her purse. "It's not far." Sarah watched her go, her figure dissolving into the fog. That was the last time anyone saw Kathy Marie Moulton alive, or so they thought. A few passers-by later reported glimpsing a girl matching her description on Forest Avenue, her head down, her pace quickening as if she sensed something trailing her. One man, a delivery driver, told police he'd seen her pause under a streetlight, her face pale, her eyes darting to the side. He thought she was waiting for someone. Then the fog closed in, and she was gone. By 7 p.m., the Moulton household was tense. Ellen, Kathy's mother, checked the clock repeatedly, her fingers twisting the hem of her apron. "She's never late," she murmured to George, who tried to reassure her. "She's probably just caught up with friends." But as the hours ticked by, the silence grew oppressive. George drove the route to Forest Avenue, his headlights slicing through the fog, his voice hoarse as he called Kathy's name. The streets were empty, the city eerily quiet. By 9 p.m., they called the police, their voices trembling with a fear they couldn't yet name. The officer who took the call noted Ellen's desperation, the way her words tumbled out in a rush. "She's a good girl," Ellen said. "She wouldn't just run off." The investigation began swiftly, but the fog seemed to have swallowed every clue. Flyers with Kathy's picture, smiling, her hair tucked behind her ears, went up on every telephone pole in Portland. Neighbors whispered, their theories growing darker with each passing day. Then came the first real lead, a stolen blue Cadillac, spotted cruising the back roads of Portland the night Kathy vanished. Behind the wheel was Lester Everett, a 20-year-old with a rap sheet for petty theft and a smile that never reached his eyes. Witnesses claimed Kathy was in the passenger seat, her face pressed against the window, her expression unreadable. Another figure was in the car. Ronald Reed Purley, a man whose name was spoken in hushed tones. Ronald was older, his face hardened by years of trouble, his record stained with charges of rape and home invasion. His presence was a dark cloud over the case, a promise of violence. The trail led north to Aroostook County, a remote stretch of Maine where the pines grew so dense they seemed to whisper secrets. A garage employee in Fort Fairfield remembered the Cadillac pulling up, its engine sputtering. Lester, Kathy, and Ronald stepped out, their faces drawn. They needed new tires, the employee said, but what stuck with him was Ronald's control over Kathy. He walked her to the bathroom, his hand clamped on the back of her neck, his fingers digging into her skin. Her eyes were hollow, her movements stiff, as if she was fighting an invisible chain. She looked like she was screaming inside, the employee later told police, his voice shaking. But she didn't say a word. Across the Canadian border, on the Tobique Reserve, the trio's presence was noted by locals. The reserve was a place of quiet beauty, its rivers and forests hiding a history of secrets. Kathy and Lester were seen for days lingering in the shadows of the community. They worked at McBride's farm in Mars Hill, harvesting potatoes under a sky that seemed to press down on them. Kathy was different now, her vibrancy replaced by a haunted stillness. She befriended a teenage girl named Lily, who worked the fields beside her. Kathy whispered about her parents, how they must be frantic, how she just wanted to go home. "I don't belong here," she told Lily, her voice breaking. "Something's wrong with them." Lily noticed the way Kathy flinched when Lester or Ronald approached, her body tensing as if bracing for a blow. At night she cried, her sobs muffled by the thin walls of the bunkhouse. The farm was a strange place, its workers a mix of drifters and locals, their eyes guarded. Strange things happened in the fields. Tools went missing, shadows moved in the dusk, and the air carried a faint hum, like a voice just out of earshot. Lily later told investigators she'd seen Kathy staring into the woods one night, her face pale, her lips moving as if speaking to someone who wasn't there. "She said she saw a woman," Lily whispered. "A woman in white, standing at the edge of the trees. She said she was calling her name." The other workers dismissed it as nerves, but Lily wasn't so sure. The farm felt wrong, like the ground itself was watching. Lester grew increasingly erratic, his temper flaring at Kathy's pleas to go home. "You're not going anywhere," he'd snap, his voice low and dangerous. Ronald was worse, his presence a constant threat. He watched Kathy with a predatory intensity, his silence more terrifying than words. One night, as a bonfire roared and the workers drank cheap whiskey, Lester's patience snapped. Kathy had been begging again, her voice rising, her hands trembling. "Please, just take me back to Portland," she said, tears streaming down her face. Lester grabbed her arm, his grip bruising, and pulled her toward the Cadillac. "We're going for a ride," he said, his voice a growl. The other workers watched, uneasy, but no one intervened. The car's taillights disappeared into the night, leaving a silence that felt like a scream. The next morning, Lester returned alone. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. "Dropped her off at another camp," he muttered, but his story didn't add up. The Cadillac's interior was stained, the air inside heavy with the scent of copper. Lily noticed a tear in his jacket, a dark smear on his sleeve. She didn't ask questions. She was too afraid of the answers. Days later, word came that Kathy had been left with Ronald on the Tobique Reserve. Witnesses saw her there, her face gaunt, her movements slow as if she was fading away. Ronald's family closed ranks, their home a fortress of silence. They whispered among themselves, their words cryptic, their eyes avoiding the curious gazes of outsiders. Lester fled to Florida, chasing the orange groves and a life free of questions. He never returned to Maine, and in the mid-1980s, cancer claimed him at 35, his secrets buried with him. Ronald remained the prime suspect, his refusal to cooperate a wall that investigators couldn't breach. Even an offer of immunity didn't loosen his tongue. His family hinted at darker truths, One of their own had harmed Kathy, they said, but no names were given, no evidence produced. The reserve was searched, its forests scoured, but the land gave up nothing. The Cadillac was found abandoned, its tires slashed, its interior stripped, as if someone had tried to erase its history. In 1983, a hunter stumbled across a skeleton in the woods near Smyrna, Maine, surrounded by tattered clothing, a dress, a jacket, a brown leather purse. The bones were fragile, bleached by time, and the hunter swore they belonged to a young woman. He tried to mark the spot, but the forest was a labyrinth, its paths shifting in the mist. When he returned with police, the site was empty, the bones gone, as if the earth itself had swallowed them. Locals whispered of a curse, of a spirit tied to the woods, a girl who wandered the pines, her voice carried on the wind. Some said they saw her at night, a figure in a blue dress, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Investigators believe Kathy died on the Tobique Reserve before Thanksgiving 1971. Her life ended in a place where screams went unheard. The farm, the reserve, the Cadillac, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. Ellen Moulton, now frail and gray, still lights a candle every September, her prayers mingling with the fog that rolls in from the sea. George passed in 2017, his heart heavy with unanswered questions. The streets of Portland are quieter now, but the fog still lingers, hiding secrets that may never see the light. Kathy Marie Moulton's story is a wound that refuses to heal, a ghost that haunts the edges of a town that can't forget. Story 2, The Disappearance of Mary Virginia Carpenter. June 1st, 1948. Denton, Texas. The Texas sun sank low, painting the horizon in hues of blood and gold. Denton was quiet, its streets shimmering with heat as the day gave way to a restless dusk. Mary Virginia Carpenter, 21, stepped off the train at the station, her suitcase heavy with the weight of her ambitions. She was a Texarkana girl, born in a town scarred by the shadow of the Phantom Killer, a specter who'd claimed 5 lives in the spring of 1946. Mary had known 3 of those victims, friends whose faces haunted her dreams, their laughter cut short by a monster who was never caught. But she'd left Texarkana behind, chasing a new beginning at Texas Women's University. She was set to start the summer term, training to become a laboratory technician, a career that promised stability in a world that felt increasingly unsteady. Her dark hair was swept back, her eyes bright with determination, but there was a flicker of unease in her gaze, as if she sensed the darkness waiting just beyond the station's platform. Mary hailed a taxi, her fingers brushing the handle of her suitcase. The driver, Edgar Ray Zachary, was a lean man with a face carved by hard years and harder choices. His eyes lingered on her a moment too long, his smile thin and unconvincing. "Where to, miss?" he asked, his voice rough as gravel. "Brackenridge Hall," Mary replied, settling into the back seat. The taxi smelled of stale tobacco and something metallic, like rust or blood. As they drove through Denton's quiet streets, the town seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and dust, but there was something else, a faint, sour tang that made Mary's skin prickle. She glanced out the window, watching the shadows stretch long and thin, like fingers reaching for her. It was 9:30 p.m. when they reached Brackenridge Hall, a looming brick building on the university campus. The windows glowed faintly, but the grounds were eerily still, the only sound the hum of cicadas and the distant bark of a dog. Mary handed Edgar $1 and a ticket for her trunk, asking him to pick it up from the station the next day. "I'll be here," he said, his eyes flicking to her suitcase, then back to her face. She nodded, stepping out into the humid night, her yellow dress catching the moonlight. As Edgar pulled away, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw her approach 2 young men standing near a yellow Pontiac convertible parked under a sprawling oak. One was tall, his silhouette sharp and angular. The other was stocky, his posture tense, like a coiled spring. Mary greeted them, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed forced, as if she was trying to convince herself they were friends. Edgar drove off, assuming she was safe. He was wrong. Mary never checked into Brackenridge Hall. Her trunk sat unclaimed at the station, gathering dust like a forgotten promise. By morning, her absence was a scream in the silence. Her mother, Hazel, called the university, her voice trembling as she asked if Mary had arrived. When the dorm matron confirmed she hadn't, Hazel's world tilted. She called the police, her words spilling out in a frantic rush. "She's not the type to run off," Hazel insisted. "She was excited about school. She would have called." Mary was close to her family, a dutiful daughter who'd taken a break from college in 1946 to care for Hazel during an illness. She'd returned to Texarkana then, saving money, rebuilding her dreams. Running away wasn't in her nature, not without a word, not without a trace. The investigation began with a flurry of activity. Flyers went up across Denton, Mary's face smiling from every lamppost and storefront. Her dark eyes seemed to plead for answers, her smile a ghost of the girl she'd been. The police interviewed friends, classmates, anyone who might have seen her. A few students recalled spotting a girl in a yellow dress near the campus that night, her figure swallowed by the shadows. One groundskeeper swore he'd heard a woman's voice near Brackenridge Hall, soft and urgent, saying, "I need to go." But the trail went cold almost immediately, as if the earth itself had conspired to hide her. Then came the first real lead, Edgar Ray Zachary. The taxi driver was no stranger to trouble. His record was littered with petty crimes, shoplifting, bar fights, a reputation for a temper that flared like dry tinder. His wife, Clara, claimed he'd been home by 10 p.m., her voice firm but her eyes darting nervously. The police pressed him, their questions sharp. "What did you see? Who were those men?" Edgar stuck to his story. Mary got out, approached the two men, and he drove away. But there was something in his demeanor, a twitch in his jaw, a sheen of sweat on his brow, that didn't sit right. Years later, Clara recanted, her voice barely a whisper as she admitted Edgar hadn't come home until 2 or 3 a.m., reeking of whiskey and muttering under his breath. "He was shaken," she said, like he'd seen something he couldn't shake. The two men by the Pontiac became the case's dark heart. Who were they? Friends from Texarkana? Strangers with ill intent? Witnesses described them vaguely. A tall man with a sharp jaw, a stocky one with a bullish stance. But no names surfaced. Mary had greeted them as if she knew them, her voice carrying across the quiet campus. But there was a tension in her posture, a hesitation that suggested she wasn't entirely at ease. Some speculated they were connected to her past, perhaps linked to the phantom killer who terrorized Texarkana 2 years earlier. Mary had known 3 of his victims, friends who'd laughed with her, shared secrets, danced under the same stars. The killer was never caught, his shadow lingering like a curse. Could he have followed her to Denton, drawn by some twisted obsession? The police found no evidence to support the theory, but the thought was a splinter in their minds, impossible to ignore. Mary's boyfriend, Kenny Branham, was another focus. He'd been with her in Texarkana, their relationship serious until she broke off their engagement weeks before a planned wedding. Kenny was the first to report her missing, his voice breaking as he spoke to Hazel. "She wouldn't just leave," he said. "She was happy, excited about school." He passed a polygraph test, his grief raw and unfeigned. But the police dug deeper, probing for cracks in his story. Had there been a fight? A jealous rival? Kenny insisted there was no one else. No lover coaxing her away, no ex with a grudge. Yet Mary's friends painted a different picture. "She fell in love too easily," one said, her voice soft with regret. She'd meet someone and see forever in their eyes. But Hazel dismissed the idea of an elopement. "Mary would have told me," she said. "She always did." The campus became a place of whispers. Students spoke of strange occurrences, a flicker of light in Brackenridge Hall's empty rooms, a woman's silhouette in the fog, a soft sob carried on the wind. One janitor, a grizzled man named Amos, swore he'd seen Mary's face in a window, her eyes wide with fear, her hands pressed against the glass. "It wasn't a reflection," he told police, his hands trembling. "She was there, then she wasn't." The stories grew, fed by fear and the town's unease. Denton was no stranger to ghost tales, but this felt different, as if Mary's absence had left a tear in the fabric of the place. In 1957, Edgar Zachary's name resurfaced. He was charged with attempted rape in a separate case, though the charge was dropped when the victim refused to press it. The police circled back to him, their questions sharper now. Had he followed Mary after she left his taxi? Had he seen something he wasn't telling? Edgar passed 2 polygraph tests, but their reliability was questionable, and his wife's revised timeline cast a long shadow. By the time he died in 1984, he was still a suspect, his secrets buried with him. The Pontiac men remained a mystery, their faces fading into the haze of memory. Were they predators who'd spotted Mary at the station? Or was it someone closer, someone she trusted enough to approach in the dark? The specter of the Texarkana Phantom Killer loomed large. The murders had stopped after 1946, but the fear lingered, a wound that never healed. Mary's connection to the victims, friends she'd laughed with, cried with, felt too close to be coincidence. Some theorized the killer had fixated on her, a final target in a twisted game. Others believed she'd stumbled into something else entirely, a chance encounter that turned deadly. In 1998, a tip breathed new life into the case. An anonymous caller claimed 2 men, now deceased, had raped and killed Mary, burying her body in a dam near the university. The police descended on the site, their shovels biting into the earth, but the dam held its secrets tight. No bones, no evidence, just the echo of a story that refused to die. Years turned to decades, and Mary's absence became a legend. Students at Texas Women's University still tell her story, their voices hushed as they passed Brackenridge Hall. Some claim to see her in the moonlight, a figure in a yellow dress, her footsteps silent on the grass. Others say the air grows cold when you speak her name, as if she's listening, waiting for someone to find her. Hazel and her husband passed away, their hope fading with them. But Mary's 3 cousins keep her memory alive, their prayers a fragile thread in the darkness. The station, the taxi, the Pontiac. They're pieces of a puzzle that refuses to fit, a mystery that clings to Denton like the heat of a summer night. Mary Virginia Carpenter's disappearance is a wound that festers, a ghost that haunts the edges of a town that can't forget. The Texas night swallowed her whole, and the truth lies buried somewhere in its shadows, guarded by secrets that whisper in the dark. Story 3. The Mystery of Alvin Matlock. Spring 1951, Spokane, Washington. The wind howled through the pines of Browns Mountain, a mournful wail that seemed to carry secrets older than the trees themselves. The mountain loomed over Spokane County, its slopes cloaked in dense forest, where shadows danced and the air held a perpetual chill. Alvin Matlock, a 21-year-old Army veteran, lived alone in a weathered cabin perched on the mountain's edge. He was a man carved by war, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon with the vigilance of someone who'd seen too much. His cabin was a Spartan refuge, a sagging cot, a rusted wood stove, a rifle propped against the wall, its barrel glinting in the dim light. 2 battered trucks, a Ford and a Chevy, sat outside, their engines reliable despite the dents and scratches that told stories of rough roads and hard years. Alvin was a loner, preferring the solitude of the wilderness to the clamor of Spokane streets. In March, he'd called his family, his voice steady as he described the view from his porch. The way the stars burned brighter up here, the way the silence felt alive. It was the last time they'd hear from him. The cabin was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the ghosts of his past. He'd served in the waning days of World War II, returning to Spokane with scars that weren't all visible. His family, Mother Clara, Father Henry, and younger brother Clyde, knew he needed space, but they worried about the way he'd retreat into himself, his laughter rarer with each passing year. Clyde, only 12, idolized Alvin, trailing him through the woods on summer visits, learning to track deer and listen to the forest whispers. "This is my place," Alvin would say, his breath visible in the crisp air. "Out here, the world makes sense." But in the spring of 1951, something shifted. The mountain grew restless, its shadows darker, its silence heavier. Neighbors, few and far between, noticed Alvin's absences. Days when the cabin's chimney stood cold, when the trucks didn't rumble down the dirt road. Thanksgiving 1951 arrived, a day of warmth and tradition for the Matlock family. Clara had spent hours in the kitchen, the aroma of roasted turkey and sage filling their modest home. The table was set for four, but Alvin's chair remained empty. Clyde, his eyes bright with hope, kept glancing at the door, expecting his brother's familiar stride. By dusk, worry had settled over the house like a fog. "He's never missed Thanksgiving," Clara said, her voice trembling as she clutched Henry's arm. They called Alvin's cabin, the phone ringing into silence. Finally, Clara couldn't wait any longer. She drove to Brown's Mountain, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the road twisted through the pines. The cabin was dark, its windows like empty eyes. The stove was cold, the air thick with an eerie stillness. Both trucks were gone, their tire tracks faint in the dirt. Clara's heart pounded as she called Alvin's name, her voice swallowed by the forest. She knocked on the door of the nearest neighbor, a grizzled man named Hank Larson who lived a half-mile down the road. Hank was a recluse himself, his cabin cluttered with old tools and empty whiskey bottles. "Alvin," he said, scratching his beard, "packed up and left for Alaska, far as I know. Said he wanted a fresh start." His eyes darted away, his words too quick, too practiced. Clara wanted to believe him. Alvin had always talked about Alaska, its vast wilderness calling to the part of him that craved freedom. But something in Hank's tone didn't sit right, a crack in his story that she couldn't ignore. She returned home, her hands shaking as she told Henry and Clyde what she'd learned. "He wouldn't leave without telling us," she said, her voice breaking. "Not Alvin." The police were called, their boots crunching on the cabin's porch as they searched for clues. The place was untouched, as if Alvin had stepped out for a moment and never returned. His clothes hung in the closet, his hunting knife lay on the table, its blade gleaming. A half-finished letter to Clyde sat on the desk, the words trailing off mid-sentence. "You'd love it up here, kid. The stars are..." The rest was blank, as if something had interrupted him. The police questioned Hank, who stuck to his story, but his evasiveness raised red flags. "Didn't see nothing else," he muttered, his hands stuffed in his pockets. The investigation spread across Spokane County, flyers with Alvin's face, sharp jaw, serious eyes, plastered on every bulletin board and storefront. But the mountain kept its secrets, its silence a wall that no one could breach. Rumors began to swirl, each one darker than the last. Spokane was a small town, and gossip traveled fast. The story that gained traction was ugly. Alvin had been entangled with a married woman, a beauty named Evelyn Carter, whose husband Roy was known for his volatile temper. Evelyn was a bartender at a dive on the edge of town, her smile drawing men like moths to a flame. Alvin, they said, had been seen at her bar, his eyes lingering on her as she poured drinks. Neighbors whispered of a confrontation, a late-night fight in the woods, Roy's rage ignited by betrayal. Some claimed Evelyn herself had pulled the trigger, her hands shaking as Alvin's cries for help echoed through the trees. Others said Roy had done it, leaving Alvin's body to rot in a shallow grave. A few swore they'd heard screams that night, faint and desperate, carried on the wind from Brown's Mountain. The police chased the lead, questioning Evelyn and Roy. Evelyn was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her story vague. "I barely knew him," she said, her fingers twisting a rag as she stood behind the bar. Roy was belligerent, his fists clenched as he denied everything. "Ain't nobody touched that kid," he growled. But there was no body, no evidence, just whispers and shadows. The police searched the mountain, their dogs sniffing through the underbrush, but the forest was vast, its secrets buried deep. Hank Larson became a focal point, his Alaska story unraveling under scrutiny. He'd been seen with Alvin days before the disappearance, the two men arguing outside the cabin. "Just a friendly disagreement," Hank claimed, but his eyes told a different story. Clyde, now 83, still carries the weight of that Thanksgiving. In 2016, he and his wife, Patricia, attended a missing persons event hosted by the Spokane County Medical Examiner's Office. They brought photos of Alvin, his Army uniform crisp, his smile rare but genuine, and submitted DNA, clinging to the hope that his remains might one day be found. Patricia had become a detective in her own right, tracking down old neighbors, chasing fading memories. She'd found a woman who lived near Brown's Mountain in 1951, her voice trembling as she spoke of strange lights in the forest, a low hum that kept her awake at night. It wasn't natural, the woman said, like the mountain was alive watching us. The forest had always been a place of stories. Hikers spoke of odd occurrences, footsteps behind them with no source, a chill that didn't match the season, a figure in army fatigues vanishing into the trees. One hunter, a grizzled man named Tom, swore he'd found a rusted dog tag near a creek, the name Matlock barely legible. He dropped it in the mud, and when he reached for it, it was gone, as if the earth had claimed it. Another man, a logger, reported hearing a voice in the woods, low and urgent, saying, "Help me." He'd searched for hours but found nothing but silence. The stories grew, fed by the mountain's eerie presence. Some said Alvin's spirit lingered, trapped where he'd last been seen. Others believed he'd made it to Alaska, living off the land, a ghost in the wilderness. But the absence of records, no trace of Alvin in Alaska, no sign of his trucks, no word from the man who'd always kept in touch, pointed to something darker. Patricia's investigations led her to a retired deputy who'd worked the case in '51. Over coffee, his hands trembling with age, he told her about a night he'd never forget. "I was patrolling near Brown's Mountain," he said. "Saw a light in the trees, like a fire, but it moved too fast, too strange. I followed it, but it vanished. Then I heard a scream. Male, desperate. I searched till dawn, but there was nothing." He paused, his eyes distant. "That mountain's got a hunger. It takes what it wants." Clyde still drives to Brown's Mountain, his old pickup rattling along the same dirt road his mother took all those years ago. The cabin is gone now, reclaimed by the forest, its timbers rotted, its foundation swallowed by moss. He stands where it once stood, the wind carrying the faint echo of his brother's voice. "You'd love it up here, kid." The stars are still bright, but they offer no answers. The mountain looms, its pines whispering secrets that no one can decipher. Was Alvin killed in a lover's quarrel, his body hidden in the underbrush? Did Hank know more than he let on, his silence a shield for his own guilt? Or did the mountain itself claim him, a sacrifice to something older, something hungrier? The mystery of Alvin Matlock is a wound that refuses to heal, a ghost that haunts the slopes of Brown's Mountain. Clyde and Patricia hold on to hope, their DNA sample a fragile tether to a truth that may never surface. The forest watches, its silence unbroken, its shadows hiding a story that Spokane may never fully know. Story 1. The Shadow Behind the Shed. October 30th, 2024. Rural Tennessee. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the kind of autumn chill that seeped into your bones and made you pull your jacket tighter. I was 17, a lanky kid with a mop of dark hair and a habit of overthinking everything. My name's Ethan Carter, and I lived in a one-story ranch house on the outskirts of a nowhere town called Willow Creek. Population barely 2,000. Our place was a speck in a sea of fields, with the nearest neighbor a half-mile down a gravel road. The closest thing to excitement around here was the annual Halloween festival in the town square, where kids in dollar store costumes begged for candy and old folks swapped ghost stories over cider. My parents and younger brother Caleb had left that morning for Florida. My grandmother's health was failing, and they were helping her pack up her life to move in with us. They'd be gone for 4 days, leaving me with the house to myself. A rare taste of freedom for a kid who spent most of his time dodging chores and dodging Caleb's endless pranks. The first night was perfect. I ordered a pizza, cranked my playlist of old school punk rock, and sprawled on the couch with a horror movie marathon. The house felt alive with possibility, like I was the king of my own little kingdom. But on the second night, Halloween Eve, that kingdom turned into a nightmare. I was in my bedroom, a cramped space with posters of Nirvana and the Misfits plastered on the walls. A cluttered desk piled with school books, and a bed that sagged in the middle. My dog, Rusty, a scruffy mutt with one ear perpetually flopped over, was curled up at the foot of the bed, snoring softly. I was scrolling through my phone, half watching a grainy YouTube video about top 10 haunted places in Tennessee, when it happened. A sharp, deliberate slap against my bedroom window. The sound cut through the quiet like a knife, loud enough to make me drop my phone onto the blanket. My heart lurched, a sudden jolt of adrenaline flooding my system. The noise wasn't like a branch tapping or a bird smacking into the glass. It was too precise, too human, like an open palm striking the window with intent. I froze, my eyes darting to the window, hidden behind faded blue blinds that hadn't been replaced since we moved in 5 years ago. Rusty's head snapped up, his ears twitching, a low growl rumbling in his throat. He heard it too. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a raccoon, I thought, or a stray cat knocking something over. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields and a thin line of trees that marked the edge of our backyard. But the sound had a weight to it, a purpose that made my skin prickle. I sat up, my breath shallow, and listened. The house was silent again, but it wasn't a comforting silence. It was the kind that felt alive, like the air itself was holding its breath. I grabbed my phone, my fingers clumsy as I paused the video. Rusty's growls grew louder, his eyes fixed on the window. "Easy, boy," I whispered, more to calm myself than him. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. The window faced the backyard, a wide expanse of grass that sloped down to a rusted chain-link fence and the trees beyond. There were no streetlights out here, just the pale glow of the moon casting long, jagged shadows across the yard. I crept toward the window, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The blinds rattled faintly as I touched the cord, my hand trembling. What if someone was out there? My friend Logan was the first person who came to mind. He was a year older, a wiry kid with a devilish grin and a reputation for pulling pranks. Last Halloween, he'd snuck into my yard and strung fake cobwebs across my bike, laughing his ass off when I freaked out. But this felt different. Logan's pranks were loud, obvious, meant to get a reaction. This was stealthy, malicious. I pulled the blinds up an inch, just enough to peek outside. The yard was empty, the grass shimmering with a thin layer of frost under the moonlight. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches clawing at the sky. Nothing moved. No one was there. I let out a shaky breath, my shoulders sagging. "Stupid," I muttered, dropping the blinds. Rusty whined, pressing himself against my leg, his fur bristling. Then it came again. Slap! Louder this time, sharper, like someone had slammed their hand against the glass with enough force to rattle the frame. Rusty exploded into barks, his teeth bared, his body rigid. I stumbled back, my phone slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over Rusty's frenzy. The sound wasn't random. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone was testing me, daring me to look again. I scooped up my phone and opened Snapchat, my hands shaking as I started recording. If this was Logan or one of my other friends, Sarah or Mike, maybe, though they weren't the pranking type, I'd catch them in the act. "All right, assholes," I said under my breath, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Let's see you." I yanked the blinds up fully, the phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness outside like a blade. The yard was still empty, no figures, no movement, just the same frosty grass and swaying trees. I panned the camera left and right, my breath fogging the glass. "Come on," I muttered, my voice trembling. I was half expecting Logan to leap out with a scream, his stupid laugh echoing through the night. But the silence was oppressive, broken only by Rusty's low growls and the faint hum of crickets. I lowered the phone, my heart still racing. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just jumpy, hyped up on too many horror movies. I started to turn away when another sound stopped me dead. A metallic rattle from the front of the house. My blood ran cold. The front door. The doorknob was shaking, violently, like someone was trying to wrench it open. The door itself thudded in its frame, each jolt sending a spike of fear through me. Rusty's barks turned frantic, echoing through the house like a siren. I stumbled into the living room, my phone still recording, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The front door was solid oak, locked tight. I checked it twice before bed, a habit drilled into me by my mom's paranoia about living so far from town. But the rattling was relentless, a frantic, almost desperate attempt to get inside. The doorknob twisted and shook, the sound grating against my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. I stood frozen, staring at the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. Then as suddenly as it started, the rattling stopped. The silence was worse somehow, like the calm before a storm. Rusty stopped barking, but his ears stayed pinned back, his body tense. I crept closer to the door, my phone shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. No answer, just the faint whistle of the wind outside. My phone buzzed, a Snapchat notification. It was Sarah, one of the 3 friends I'd sent the first video to. "Dude, what was that noise? You okay?" Her message was time-stamped from her dorm room at the community college an hour away. I sent the video to Logan and Mike, my fingers fumbling over the screen. "Someone's outside, not kidding." Mike replied almost instantly, a video of him in his basement, his Xbox glowing in the background. "Not me, man. That's creepy as hell. Call the cops." My stomach twisted. Logan still hadn't responded, but he'd opened the snap. Typical Logan, always playing games, always leaving you hanging. I clung to the hope it was him, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. If it wasn't Logan, who the hell was out there? Then a new sound, a sickening crunch from the back of the house, like wood splintering under force. My heart stopped. The screened-in patio door off the kitchen. I ran through the house, my socks slipping on the hardwood, Rusty at my heels. The glass sliding doors that led to the patio were locked, the blinds closed, but I could hear it, the unmistakable sound of the screen being torn open, the wooden frame groaning as it was pried apart. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone again. Rusty's snarls turned to whimpers, his tail tucked between his legs. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to call 911 and barricade myself in my room. But I had to know. I ripped the blinds open, the phone's flashlight illuminating the patio. The screen door was in tatters, hanging off its hinges like a broken wing. Shreds of mesh fluttered in the breeze, and the wooden frame was splintered, as if something had clawed its way through. Beyond the patio, the backyard stretched into darkness, the grass shimmering under the moon. I panned the camera, my breath coming in ragged gasps. For a split second, I thought I saw something. A shadow, humanoid but wrong, its edges blurred like smoke dissolving into the night. It was at the far end of the yard near the tool shed, a rickety structure my dad used to store lawnmowers and old paint cans. The figure was gone before I could focus, melting into the trees. I blinked, my eyes straining against the darkness. Was it real? Or was my mind playing tricks, conjuring phantoms from too many late-night horror flicks? I stumbled back, the phone slipping from my hands and clattering to the floor. Rusty pressed himself against my legs, his whimpers breaking the silence. I scooped up the phone and sent the video to Logan, Sarah, and Mike, my fingers barely able to type. "Someone's here." "Help," Sarah replied within minutes, a voice message. "Ethan, oh my God, that's terrifying. Are you okay? Call the police." Mike sent another video, his face pale under the glow of his basement lights. "Dude, that screen door, that's not a prank. Get out of there." Logan still hadn't responded, but the app showed he'd seen the snap. I stared at my phone, willing him to reply, to admit it was him, to laugh it off and say he'd been messing with me all along. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained what was happening. The operator was calm, infuriatingly so, her voice clipped and professional. "Stay calm, sir. Lock all doors and windows and stay put. We'll send a patrol car, but it might take a while. We're stretched thin tonight." Halloween Eve, of course. Every cop in the county was probably dealing with drunk teens and vandalism in town. I hung up and ran through the house, checking every window, every lock. The front door was secure, the back door bolted, the window sealed tight. I dragged a kitchen chair under the patio door's handle for good measure, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip the wood. Rusty followed me, his eyes darting to every shadow, his fur still bristling. I retreated to my room, pushing my dresser against the door. It wasn't much, but it made me feel marginally safer. Rusty curled up beside me, his warmth a small comfort against the growing dread. The house was silent now, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air was charged with something waiting to strike. I sat on my bed, my phone clutched in one hand, a baseball bat from my closet in the other. The minutes dragged on, each one stretching into eternity. My phone buzzed again. Logan, finally. I opened the snap, my heart pounding. It was a photo of him in bed, his girlfriend asleep beside him, her hair spilling over the pillow. The caption read, "What the fuck, bro? Call the cops now." The timestamp showed he was at home, an hour away in Clarksville. My stomach dropped. It wasn't him. It was never him. I don't know how long I sat there, the bat across my lap, Rusty's head resting on my knee. The police arrived around 1 a.m., their flashlights sweeping the yard like searchlights. I let them in, my voice hoarse as I recounted everything. The slaps on the window, the rattling doorknob, the shredded patio door. They inspected the house, their boots heavy on the floorboards. The screen door was as bad as I'd described, the frame splintered, the mesh torn to ribbons. But the yard was empty, no footprints in the frost, no signs of forced entry beyond the patio. "Probably kids," one of the officers said, a burly guy with a mustache. "Halloween brings out the troublemakers." I wanted to scream. Kids didn't do this. Kids didn't move like shadows, didn't vanish without a trace. But I nodded, thanked them, and watched their cruiser disappear down the road. The house felt emptier after they left, like the darkness had reclaimed it. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on, the bat beside me, Rusty pressed against my side. Every creak, every gust of wind made my heart race. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through social media, but my eyes kept drifting to the window, half expecting to see a face staring back. Days later, when my parents and Caleb were back, I forced myself to rewatch the Snapchat videos. I hadn't looked at them since that night, too afraid of what I might see. The first video from the bedroom window showed nothing but the empty yard, the flashlight beam glinting off the frost. The second video from the patio was worse. I froze the frame at the moment I'd opened the blinds, my breath catching in my throat. There, at the edge of the yard, near the tool shed, was a figure. It wasn't Logan, wasn't a kid playing a prank. It was tall, too tall, its limbs unnaturally long and thin, like branches stripped of leaves. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, and its face, God, its face was a blur, like the camera couldn't capture it. But its eyes were clear, glinting like polished obsidian in the flashlight's beam, locked on me. It wasn't moving, wasn't running. It was watching, waiting, like a predator sizing up its prey. I deleted the videos after that, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the button. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a glitch in the camera, anything to keep the fear at bay. My parents dismissed the whole thing as a Halloween scare. Probably some local teens hopped up on energy drinks and bad ideas. Caleb thought it was cool, like something out of a horror game. But I knew better. The tool shed is still there, at the edge of the yard, its paint peeling, its door creaking in the wind. I don't go near it anymore. I don't look out the window at night either. But sometimes when the house is too quiet and Rusty's ears perk up for no reason, I hear it, a faint slap against the glass, like a hand pressing against the window, waiting for me to look. And in my nightmares, I see those eyes, black and endless, watching from the shadows, closer every time. Story 2, The Screaming Lake, January 12th, 2025. Cedar Hollow, Iowa. The Midwest winter had clamped down on our small town like a vice. The air so cold it burned your lungs with every breath. Cedar Hollow was a speck on the map, a tight-knit community of 3,000 souls nestled in a valley where the days were short and the nights were endless. Our house sat at the end of Willow Lane, a cul-de-sac with 7 homes arranged in a neat circle atop a gentle hill. Below us, a frozen lake glittered under the moonlight, its edges fringed by a sparse forest of skeletal oaks and pines. By day, the lake was a postcard. Kids skated on its surface, and neighbors fished through drilled holes. But at night it transformed, its dark waters and shadowed woods whispering secrets that made your skin crawl. I'm Lucas Bennett, 17, a junior at Cedar Hollow High with a knack for overthinking and a bedroom that doubled as a shrine to my obsessions. Posters of Green Day and Black Sabbath, stacks of dog-eared comic books, and a desk buried under half-finished sketches and homework. My mom, Karen, was a nurse at the county hospital, often gone for night shifts that left the house eerily quiet. My older brother, Jake, was home from Iowa State for winter break, usually holed up in his room with his gaming rig. Our cat, Socks, a lean black Tom with eyes like emerald lanterns, ruled the house with silent authority, slipping through shadows like he knew something we didn't. It was 2:03 a.m., according to the glowing red digits on my nightstand clock. I was sprawled on my bed, wrapped in a faded quilt that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old memories. My laptop was propped on my knees, playing a YouTube video titled Creepy Midwest Urban Legends in a low drone. The house was still, save for the occasional groan of the heater kicking on, its warmth barely reaching my corner of the second floor. Mom was asleep upstairs, her door closed to block out the world before her early shift. Jake was in his room down the hall, probably lost in some online battle, his headset cutting him off from reality. That's when I heard it, a soft thud from across my room, like a book slipping off my desk or a shoe dropping to the floor. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, slicing through the narrator's voice like a knife. I hit pause, my ears straining against the sudden silence. My room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of my laptop and a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the gap in my curtains. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I scanned the room. My guitar leaned against the wall, its strings glinting faintly. My closet door was ajar, revealing a tangle of clothes and old skateboards. My desk was a mess of pencils, notebooks, and a half-empty energy drink can. Nothing was out of place, but the silence was wrong, too thick, too alive. Socks? I called softly, expecting to see the cat's green eyes glinting from under the bed or behind the laundry basket. He was always knocking things over, chasing shadows in the night. But there was no sign of him, no soft patter of paws, no flick of a tail. The room was empty, the shadows too still. I shrugged, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. Old houses made noises, right? The place was built in the 70s, all creaky floorboards and drafty windows. Probably just the pipes settling or the wind rattling something outside. I hit play on the video, the narrator's voice filling the silence again, but the unease lingered, a faint prickle at the back of my neck. I was halfway through a story about a haunted bridge in Illinois when a new sound stopped me cold. It wasn't in the house this time. It was outside, coming from the direction of the lake. A high-pitched, guttural screech, like metal scraping against bone, or a scream caught in a throat and twisted into something inhuman. My heart lurched, adrenaline flooding my system like ice water. It wasn't a coyote or a fox. I'd heard those plenty of times, their sharp yips and howls a familiar part of the night out here. This was different, raw and primal, almost human, but wrong, like a child's cry warped into something that didn't belong. The screech came again, louder, more desperate, echoing through the trees like a siren's wail. My window rattled faintly, as if the sound was pressing against the glass, demanding entry. I scrambled to my feet, my laptop sliding onto the bed, the quilt tangling around my legs. The sound wasn't just one note, it was layered, a chorus of anguish that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Sometimes it was a high-pitched wail, sometimes a low, guttural moan, and sometimes, God help me, it sounded like words, garbled and distorted, like a voice trying to break through static. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the camera and started recording. I needed proof, something to show I wasn't losing my mind. The lake was a black mirror under the moon, its frozen surface glinting faintly, but the forest beyond was a wall of shadows, impenetrable and alive. I leaned toward the window, the cold glass fogging under my breath, and held my phone out to capture the sound. The screech rose and fell, sharp and piercing, then low and guttural, like a wounded animal pleading for mercy. But there was something else in it, a rhythm, almost like a chant. Though I couldn't make out the words, my skin prickled, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the January cold. I stopped the recording and sent it to my friend Ethan, who lived a few streets over in a house that backed onto the same lake. "Dude, you hear this? What the hell is it?" I typed, my fingers clumsy with fear. Ethan was the skeptical type, always quick to debunk ghost stories with talk of science and logic. But I needed someone to hear this, to tell me I wasn't crazy. I needed confirmation, someone to anchor me to reality. I slipped on my sneakers, not bothering with socks, and crept down the hall to Jake's room. The floorboards creaked under my weight, each sound amplified in the quiet house. Jake's door was cracked open, the blue glow of his monitor spilling into the hallway like a beacon. I pushed it open, finding him hunched over his desk, his headset on, his fingers flying across the keyboard in a frenzy of clicks. "Jake," I whispered, tapping his shoulder. He jumped, yanking off his headset and spinning around. "Jesus, Lucas, you scared the shit out of me," he snapped, his eyes narrowing. Then he saw my face, pale and wide-eyed. "What's wrong? You look like you saw a ghost." "You hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The screaming? From the lake?" He frowned, tilting his head like he thought I was messing with him. "Screaming? Nah, I've been in a match. What are you talking about?" I played the recording, and his expression changed. The screech filled the room, tinny through my phone's speaker but no less chilling. It started low, almost a moan, then spiked into a high-pitched wail that made my stomach twist. Jake's eyes widened, his jaw tightening. "Holy shit," he muttered, leaning closer to the phone. What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "It's been going on for like 10 minutes. It's coming from the lake." Ethan's reply buzzed through, a voice message. "Dude, that's fucked up. Sounds like a kid, but not. Maybe a fox? They scream weird, right?" But I'd heard foxes before, their cries sharp and barking. This was different, too human, too deliberate, like it was trying to communicate something. I played the recording again, and Jake's face grew paler with every second. "That's not a fox," he said quietly. "That's not any animal I've ever heard." Jake grabbed his flashlight, a heavy mag light he kept for camping, its beam strong enough to cut through fog. "We should check it out," he said, but his voice betrayed his unease, a slight tremor that mirrored my own. He was 20, 2 years older, and he liked to act tough, but I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear twisting my gut. "No way," I said, my mouth dry. "What if it's, I don't know, a person, someone hurt, or something else?" Jake didn't answer, but his grip on the flashlight tightened. We moved to the living room, the big bay window offering a clear view of the cul-de-sac and the hill sloping down to the lake. The neighborhood was dark, the other houses silent, their windows black. The lake glimmered faintly, its frozen surface reflecting the moon like a cracked mirror. The forest beyond was a jagged line of shadows, the trees swaying gently in the wind. The screech came again, closer now, as if whatever was making it had moved through the trees, creeping toward the edge of the water. Jake flicked on the porch light, the yellow glow spilling across the front yard. We pressed our faces to the window, our breath fogging the glass. "See anything?" I whispered, my eyes scanning the darkness. The hill was empty, the grass dusted with snow. But then I saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of the yard, where the hill met the forest. A small, hunched figure, no taller than a child, stood just beyond the light's reach. Its posture was wrong, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its arms hanging limp and too long for its body. Its face was a blur, like my eyes couldn't focus on it, but I felt its gaze, heavy and piercing, locked on the house. "Jake," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Do you see that?" He nodded, his jaw clenched. "Yeah, what the fuck is that?" The figure took a step forward, its movements jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. The snow crunched under its feet, the sound carrying up the hill. Socks appeared from nowhere, hissing, his back arched like a Halloween cat. The figure stopped, its head snapping toward the window, and for a moment I swore I saw its eyes. Black, empty, like holes punched in the night. They weren't human. They weren't anything I'd ever seen before. We bolted to my room, slamming the door and shoving my desk against it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Jake kept the flashlight trained on the door, his knuckles white. I called 911, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what we'd seen. A figure, a scream, something by the lake that wasn't right. The operator was skeptical, her tone clipped. "Have you been drinking, sir? Using any substances?" I wanted to scream at her, but I kept my voice steady, begging her to send someone. "We'll dispatch a unit," she said finally. "Stay inside, keep everything locked. It'll be about 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. We sat in silence, the only sound our ragged breathing and Socks's low growls. The house felt alive, the walls creaking, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I kept my phone in my hand, checking for Ethan's replies. He'd sent another message. "That's no fox, man." "That's creepy as hell. You okay?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't feel okay. I felt like the world had tilted, like something had slipped through a crack in reality and was standing just outside waiting. The screech came again, faint now but closer, as if it was circling the house. Jake gripped the flashlight tighter, his eyes darting to the window. "We should check again," he said, his voice low. "Make sure it's not—" "I don't know, coming closer." "No!" I snapped, my fear boiling over. "We stay here, the cops are coming." But Jake's stubborn streak kicked in. He crept to the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. "I don't see it," he whispered. "It's gone." I didn't believe him. I could feel it, that weight in the air, like eyes boring into the back of my skull. I joined him at the window, my hands shaking as I looked out. The yard was empty, the lake still and silent under the moon. But the forest felt different now, like it was holding its breath, hiding something in its shadows. Then a new sound, a low rhythmic thump, like footsteps crunching through the snow. It was coming from the hill, moving toward the house. My breath caught, my eyes locked on the darkness beyond the porch light. "Jake," I whispered, "it's coming closer." He didn't answer, but his hand tightened on the flashlight. The thump grew louder, deliberate, each step echoing like a drum beat in my chest. Socks hissed again, his tail lashing, and I grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him back from the window. "We need to move," I said, my voice barely audible. "Now!" We retreated to the living room, locking the door behind us. Jake kept the flashlight on, sweeping it across the room like a weapon. The house was silent again, but it wasn't a comforting silence. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air was charged with something waiting to strike. I checked my phone again, Ethan's messages piling up. "You guys okay? Did you call the cops?" That shit's not normal. The police arrived 30 minutes later, their cruiser crunching through the snow. 2 officers, a man with a graying mustache and a woman with sharp eyes, swept the yard with flashlights, their radios crackling. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone by the lake. The snow was undisturbed, the ice on the lake unbroken. "Probably kids messing around," the male officer said, his tone dismissive. "Winter break, they get bored, pull stupid pranks." "It wasn't kids," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You didn't hear that scream. You didn't see that thing." The female officer raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "We'll keep an eye out," she said, handing me a card with the station's number. "Call if you hear anything else." They left and the house felt emptier, colder. Jake and I didn't sleep that night. We stayed in the living room, the TV on low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Socks curled up between us, his eyes fixed on the window. The screech didn't come again, but the silence was worse, like it was waiting for us to let our guard down. The next morning, I told Mom what happened, but she was skeptical, exhausted from her shift. "Probably a coyote," she said, stirring her coffee. "Or those Johnson kids down the street. They're always causing trouble." But Jake and I exchanged a look. We knew it wasn't coyotes or kids. There was something out there, something that didn't belong. Days later, I forced myself to rewatch the recording. I hadn't touched it since that night, too afraid of what I might hear. The video was grainy, the sound distorted, but the screech was unmistakable, rising and falling like a banshee's wail. And then I saw it in the background, at the edge of the forest, a small, blurry figure standing just beyond the trees. Its face was a smear, like the camera couldn't capture it, but its eyes burned through the screen, black and endless, locked on the house. I showed Jake, and he went pale, his hands shaking as he paused the video. "That's it," he whispered. "That's what we saw." We deleted the video after that, unable to stomach it. Mom thought we were just spooked, but Jake and I knew better. I started digging into the town's history, scouring old newspaper archives at the library. Cedar Hollow had a dark side, it turned out. Decades ago, a child had gone missing near the lake, last seen wandering into the forest. The search parties found nothing, and the case went cold. But locals whispered about strange lights in the woods, voices calling from the water. Some said the lake was cursed, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. I don't go near the lake anymore, not at night. I keep my curtains closed, my windows locked, but sometimes when the wind dies down and the house is too still, I hear it, a faint, childlike scream echoing from the water, calling my name. And in my dreams, I see those eyes watching from the trees, waiting for me to step outside. Story 3. The Breath in the Dark, March 2025, a small town in upstate New York. I live alone in the lower level of a two-family house, a cozy apartment with creaky floors and a view of a sprawling backyard. The owner, Rob, lives upstairs when he's around, which isn't often. He's got other properties, so he's usually gone for weeks at a time, leaving me to enjoy the solitude. We're friends, or close enough, and he always lets me know when he'll be away so I can use the driveway for both my cars. A beat-up sedan and a rusty pickup I'm slowly restoring. It was a Tuesday night, and Rob was out of state for 2 weeks. I was in my living room, curled up on the couch with a paperback thriller, the kind with dog-eared pages and a cracked spine. The lamp beside me cast a warm glow, the only light in the house. Outside, the night was alive with the chirp of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. The sliding glass door to the backyard deck was locked, the blinds drawn tight. I liked it that way. Private, quiet, just me and my book. I was halfway through a chapter when it happened. A loud, deliberate bang against the glass door. The sound was so sharp it felt like a gunshot, reverberating through the room. My book slipped from my hands, landing with a thud on the floor. My heart raced, my mind scrambling for an explanation. A bird, maybe? But it was too late for birds, and the noise was too heavy, too intentional. I sat frozen, staring at the blinds, waiting for another sound. Nothing. Just the crickets, louder now, mocking my fear. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady, and crept toward the door. The blinds were old, slatted, and I hesitated before touching them. What if someone was out there, their face pressed against the glass? I shook off the thought. Nobody came around here. The town was dead quiet, the kind of place where the biggest crime was kids stealing apples from an orchard. I flicked on the deck light and slid the blinds aside, my breath catching. The deck was empty, the wooden planks gleaming under the bulb's harsh glare. Beyond it, the backyard stretched into darkness, the grass fading into a line of trees that marked the property's edge. I scanned the area, looking for movement, for anything, nothing. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the adrenaline. "Probably a raccoon," I muttered, though I didn't believe it. I closed the blinds and went back to my book, but the words blurred on the page. The house felt different now, like it was watching me, waiting. An hour later, it happened again. Not one bang, but a series of them, rapid and deliberate, like someone was pounding on the glass with both fists. The sound was frantic, almost angry, and it didn't stop. I dropped the book and grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I started recording. I needed proof, something to show Rob or the cops if it came to that. I crept toward the door again, my heart in my throat, and yanked the blinds open. The banging stopped instantly, like a switch had been flipped. The deck was empty, the light casting long shadows across the wood. I leaned closer, my phone's flashlight sweeping the area. Nothing. No footprints, no smudges on the glass, no sign anyone had been there. I stepped onto the deck, the cold air biting my skin, and peered over the railing. The backyard was still, the trees silent under the moon. I locked the door behind me and retreated to my bedroom, my nerves shot. I didn't want to be near that glass door anymore. Didn't want to feel the weight of the darkness outside. I climbed into bed, my phone still in hand, and tried to distract myself with YouTube. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that hides something, like a predator holding its breath. I was half asleep, my phone slipping from my grip, when I heard it, a low, rasping exhale, right at the foot of my bed. My eyes snapped open, my body frozen. The room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of my phone screen. I held my breath, listening, praying it was my imagination. Then it came again, a slow, deliberate breath, like someone was standing there, watching me. I lunged for the light switch, my scream echoing through the room. The bulb flickered on, bathing the space in harsh light. The room was empty, no one under the bed, no one in the closet, no one hiding in the corners. But I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't a draft, wasn't the house settling. It was a breath, human but not, heavy with intent. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and spent the rest of the night in the living room, the lamp on, the bat across my lap. Every creak, every rustle made me jump. I called Rob the next morning, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. He was sympathetic but baffled. Nothing like this had ever happened in the house before. He suggested I get a security camera, maybe talk to the neighbors. But the neighbors had nothing to report, and the town's police were as useless as ever, dismissing it as kids or critters. I installed the camera a week later, its feed linked to my phone. For days it showed nothing but the empty deck, the silent backyard. Then one night as I was reviewing the footage, I saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, standing at the edge of the deck. It didn't move, didn't approach the door, just stood there, its head tilted as if listening. The timestamp showed 3:33 a.m., the exact moment I'd woken up that night, my heart racing for no reason. I don't sleep much anymore. The camera catches nothing now, but I hear it sometimes. A faint exhale in the dark, always at the foot of my bed, always just out of sight.